In this week's video, I'm going to show you in easy to follow steps how to paint this delicate rose in watercolour so that you can really level up on your watercolour painting game. Before we dive into the tutorial, if you're new here, you may want to consider hitting that subscribe button and the bell notification so that you don't miss new content coming out every Tuesday. Let's do it. Hi guys, I always start my paintings in the same way by taping down my watercolour paper onto my watercolour board just using simple masking tape. This prevents the paper from buckling. I have my watercolours that I have selected for this tutorial along with my colour chart, my pencil, my brushes, my eraser, and I'm good to go. Here I have selected the colours for my tutorial and I've set out the line drawing as you can see. If you'd like to know how I trace down my line drawings, there's an information card on the top of your screen right now, and I will put the reference photograph along with the line drawing in the Facebook group, details of which description box below. The colours I've chosen for this tutorial are Quin Red, Permanent Rose, Burnt Umber. I will mix the burnt umber with some of the greens later just to soften them down. The greens I'm using are leaf green, sap green and Perylene green, details of which I will put in the description box below. To begin with, I've mixed a really watery wash of the green colour with a tiny bit of burnt umber mixed in it just to take some of the greenness out, and I'm applying this to the sepals at the base of the rose. This will go all over in a very weak consistency. The watercolour at this stage is really watery, and this is important because it forms part of the base colour, and I'm going to apply this all over the stalk as well as the base of the leaf. The spotter brush that I'm using is really great for getting into the corners. I'm just adding a little bit of sap green to this colour just to make it slightly greener to put all over the leaf as the base colour. This can go everywhere. Once this tone has dried, I start to make a darker value with another green tone mixed in. I'm adding a mixture of Perylene and sap at this stage and applying it to the stalk as shown. Blending it out with a brush that is just damp. I'm just going over the green tone that's now dry, mixing a little bit of burnt umber just to give it a sense of realism. With this tone, I'm applying it down the central vein of the leaf as you can see here and underneath the base of the stalk. I'm very carefully negatively painting around the pencil lines that form the veins of the leaf here. This is slightly time consuming, so I've speeded it up because it's repetitive. You can see how I'm working around these little veins, paying close attention to where they are and working around them negatively. Once this has dried, I'm using a soft number 6 size spotter to do a simple plain water glaze. This will merge the colours together and prevent the lines from looking too stark and too white. Just using a little bit of sap green to bring the two together. Once the paint has dried, I pay attention to the sepals, again negatively painting in the veins using a small number 2 size spotter brush to do this. I'm using Perylene green mixed in with a little bit of burnt umber just to give it that sense of realism without the colours looking flat. Using the tip of my brush to get in the corners, blending it through with a soft brush that is just damp. I repeat the process on all of the sepals as you can see here. Once again, when the paint is dry, I add a thicker mix of Perylene green to the base here as you can see. I'm using a number 2 size spotter and I'm blending as I go using the same technique as before, making sure that my brush is clean and then I'm dabbing it on the kitchen towel and then just blending it through. This helps merge the colours together, giving an overall feel of softness. Repeating the process as I go down the stem. I'm switching my colours between burnt umber and Perylene just to give it a sense of realism. I found that by using Perylene on its own made it look quite flat. and just using the tip of the brush to outline. Now that the paint is dry, I go over the veins that I've negatively painted just to sharpen them up using Perylene green, again with a little bit of burnt umber mixed in here and there to sharpen up the areas that have softened through with the blur of the water glaze that I did earlier. I'm also using this opportunity to sharpen the little spikes on the leaf, as you can see. And just repeating this process throughout, paying careful attention to my reference photograph. Just going through the leaf bit by bit, mixing Perylene green with a little bit of burnt umber as before, and once again just wiggling my brush and creating these little spikes on the leaf, working through bit by bit. I love the idea of the sharpness of the pointy bits of the leaf against the white of the paper, and enhancing them really makes the leaf jump off the page. I'm mixing the leaf green with the burnt umber here and just glazing over one more time to give the leaf a sense of uniformity. Without doing this, it can look a little bit disjointed, but I'm mixing all the greens and just alternating them between one and the other. You can see how I'm just painting this over the leaf as and when I feel like it, just to give it that sense of realism, and again focusing now on the little parts of the leaf buds here, working through bit by bit. Always paying close attention to my reference photograph as I work through. Once again, sharpening those little spiky bits on the edge of the leaf. And also using this opportunity once again to sharpen the little spiky bits on the outside of the sepals. I'm using my number 2 brush to do this because it has a really fine tip and it's great for getting into the corners. Now I'm focusing my attention on the flower head itself, and I'm adding some water here, dropping in a really watery mix of the Quin Red colour. Once I've applied it, I'm blending it through with a damp brush just to blur the edges. Applying a plain water glaze on the area at the top of the flower head, and once again dropping in a mixture of the Quin Red and Permanent Rose mix so that it has a really blurred effect. Once it's still wet, I'm dropping in some of the Permanent Rose and Quin Red on the top of the plant, as you can see. Once I've applied the colour, as always, I clean my brush, and I'm using the damp clean brush just to blur the colours into the paper as shown. This will give it a really soft, blurry look. Continuing this process throughout the entire flower. I speeded up the process there because the process is exactly the same throughout the flower head. I've mixed Perylene green with the Quin Red to make a burgundy tone to outline the petals. This will give the petals a real sharpness and enhance the colour as shown. I'm also using this just to wiggle the brush and create a little bit of a natural looking shape and blending the colour into the existing colour as shown. I'm using my number 2 size spotter for this because the tip of it really gives a sharp outline to each of the petals in turn. Repeating the process throughout the entire flower head. Some of the petals at the top of the rose looked too white, so I'm adding a weak mix of Quin Red and a little bit of permanent rose here and there, as you can see. Once this is dry, I'm repeating the process with a darker red on the top. Now I'm focusing on the shadow area of the rose, and I'm mixing a really watery mix of Perylene green, a tiny bit of burnt umber and a minuscule amount of one of the pink tones. It doesn't matter which one, and this is applied where shown. As always, I'm blending it through with a damp brush. It's really important that you do this, otherwise your paint will have a hard edge and won't look realistic. Now I'm just paying attention to the darker values within the rose head and applying the darker tones where shown here. It's about assessing your painting as you go through, and you'll find that as you apply some colours, the other colours will need reassessing. Because colour is relative, you won't know until you've applied some of the lighter colours how dark the darker colours need to be. Once again, blending the colours together using a damp brush. It's just a case of bringing the rose together and making it look uniform and natural, but always paying close attention to the reference photograph. It's also really important that you blend the colours together as I'm doing here, otherwise you get hard edges which make the plant look unrealistic. I'm just adding a little bit of the shadow tone here and there, once again for a sense of realism where I feel that the colours would ordinarily have a shade. I'm using the tip of my number 2 size spotter yet again to sharpen up any of the edges that I feel have lost some of the sharpness. You can take your time doing this, it's actually a really relaxing process. I've added a tiny bit of burnt umber to the shadow tone, and I'm applying it where the petals meet each other as shown here. I felt that it wasn't quite dark enough, so by adding this darker mix and again blending it through just makes it look more uniform. Once again, given an overall glaze with plain water. This will help unify the painting and bring it all together. I really like the blurred effect that this gives the painting. You can see how I'm wiggling the brush to push the paint into the paper as shown. Adding a tiny bit more burnt umber to that shadow mix to put at the base of the flower head. Once again giving a sense of realism. And finally bringing the rose together before I hand you back over to me. So thank you for watching, and I really hope that you found this video helpful. If you liked it, then do give me a thumbs up. It's a free way of letting YouTube know that you like my content, and it means that I can keep bringing you new videos every week. But there's more. If you enjoyed this video, then you may want to click on this video here where I show you how to paint this lily in watercolour using a similar technique. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.